Jake Morrison checked his instruments one more time as his small scout ship moved through the dark space near planet Zerion 7. The readings looked normal, but something felt wrong. He had been flying missions for the Earth Defense Fleet for 8 years, and his gut never lied to him. The planet below was covered in red sand and jagged mountains. Intelligence reports said the Zephyrians had built several military bases there, but they needed proof. Jake's job was simple: get close, take pictures, and get out without being seen. Earth had only made contact with alien races 2 years ago, and tensions were already high. Jake pressed a button and activated his camera systems. The ship's computers began taking detailed photos of the planet's surface. He could see the alien bases now, dark metal structures that looked like giant spiders crouching on the red ground. There were at least 12 bases, much more than Earth. Command had expected. Suddenly, alarms started screaming inside his cockpit. Red lights flashed everywhere. Jake's heart jumped as he looked at his screens. 3 Zephyrian fighter ships were coming straight at him, moving fast. Very fast. How did they spot me? Jake said to himself. His ship was supposed to be invisible to their sensors. He grabbed the controls and pushed his engines to full power. A scout ship shot forward, but the alien fighters were gaining ground. Jake tried to contact Earth Command on his radio, but only static came through. The Zephyrians were jamming his signals. He was alone out here, millions of miles from home, with 3 enemy ships closing in. The first energy blast missed his ship by inches. Jake rolled to the left and dove toward the planet. If he could reach the atmosphere, maybe he could hide in the mountain canyons. The alien ships fired again, and this time one of the blasts hit his right engine. Jake's ship shook violently. Smoke filled the cockpit, and half his controls went dead. The planet was getting bigger through his window as gravity pulled him down. He tried to restart his damaged engine, but it was no use. He was going to crash. The scout ship screamed through the thin atmosphere of Zerion 7. Jake fought with the controls, trying to find a safe place to land. The red mountains rushed up to meet him. At the last second, he spotted a flat area between 2 rocky hills and aimed for it. The crash was brutal. Jake's ship hit the ground hard, bounced twice, and slid across the sand for 200 yards, before smashing into a boulder. The impact threw Jake against his safety straps, and everything went black. When Jake woke up, his head was pounding, and blood was running down his face. The cockpit was filled with smoke and the smell of burning circuits. He unbuckled his straps and tried to stand, but his right leg sent a sharp pain through his body. Not broken, but badly hurt. Jake grabbed his emergency pack and stumbled out of the ruined ship. The air outside was thin and hot, making it hard to breathe. The crash had destroyed any chance of repair. His radio was dead. His engines were scrap metal, and he was stranded on an enemy planet. He looked around at the alien landscape. The sky was orange instead of blue, and 2 small suns hung low on the horizon. Strange rock formations jutted up from the red sand like the bones of giant creatures. In the distance, he could see dust clouds moving across the desert. Jake limped away from his crashed ship, knowing the Zephyrians would track the wreckage soon. He needed to find shelter and figure out how to survive until a rescue mission could reach him. But deep down, he knew rescue was unlikely. Earth didn't even know where he was. He had walked for maybe an hour when he heard the sound of engines overhead. Jake dove behind a large rock and looked up. 3 Zephyrian aircraft were circling his crash site like vultures. They were different from the fighters that had shot him down. These looked like transport ships. The alien ships landed near the wreckage, and Jake watched through a crack in the rocks as creatures emerged. The Zephyrians were tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like leather. They had 4 arms and heads that were too big for their bodies. Their eyes were completely black, like pools of oil. Jake counted at least 20 of them. They moved in perfect formation, checking every piece of his destroyed ship. One of them was clearly the leader, bigger than the others, with metal decorations covering his chest. Jake could hear them talking to each other in their strange language that sounded like metal scraping against stone. The leader pointed in different directions, and groups of Zephyrians spread out to search the area. Jake realized they were looking for him. His heart started beating faster as he watched them move closer to his hiding spot. Jake tried to crawl deeper into the rocks, but his injured leg made too much noise. One of the alien searchers heard the sound and turned toward him. The creature's black eyes locked onto Jake's position. The Zephyrian made a harsh sound that was probably a shout. Within seconds, all 20 aliens were running toward Jake's hiding place. He tried to run, but his damaged leg gave out after just a few steps. Jake fell face first into the red sand. The aliens surrounded him quickly. Jake rolled over and looked up at them. Up close, they were even more frightening. Their faces had no expression at all, like they were wearing masks. The leader stepped forward and said something in his scraping language. Jake didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. He was their prisoner now. 2 of the Zephyrians grabbed Jake's arms and pulled him to his feet. Their grip was incredibly strong, and their skin felt cold even through his flight suit. The leader walked around Jake slowly, studying him like he was some kind of interesting animal. The alien leader pulled out a small device and pointed it at Jake. A beam of light scanned over Jake's entire body. The device made beeping sounds, and symbols appeared on its screen. The leader looked pleased with whatever information he was getting. More words in the scraping language, and the 2 guards started dragging Jake toward their transport ships. Jake tried to resist, but the aliens were much stronger than any human. His feet barely touched the ground as they carried him. The inside of the Zephyrian transport was all metal surfaces and harsh lighting. They strapped Jake into a seat that was clearly not designed for human bodies. The restraints were tight and uncomfortable, cutting into his arms and chest as the ship lifted off. Jake got his last look at the crash site through a small window. His destroyed scout ship looked tiny from the air, just a dark spot on the endless red desert. Soon even that was gone, and there was nothing but alien landscape stretching to the horizon. The flight took about 2 hours. Jake tried to memorize the route in case he ever got a chance to escape, but everything below looked the same. Red sand, strange rocks, and nothing else. No signs of water or plant life anywhere. Finally, the transport began to descend toward what looked like a huge black fortress built into the side of a mountain. As they got closer, Jake could see it was much bigger than he had first thought. The structure was massive, with towers and walls that stretched for miles. This was clearly a major military installation, not just a simple outpost. Jake realized he was in serious trouble. Earth Command had no idea places like this existed. If the Zephyrians had bases this large, they were much more powerful than anyone had imagined. The transport landed in a courtyard surrounded by high walls. Jake was dragged out of the ship and marched toward a dark entrance in the mountain. Other aliens stopped their work to stare at him as he passed. Jake got the feeling the humans were rare around here, very rare. The guards pushed Jake through a maze of dark corridors carved into the mountain. The walls were smooth black stone that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Strange symbols were carved into the surface, glowing with a faint blue. Light that hurt Jake's eyes. They stopped at a heavy metal door that slid open with a hiss. The room beyond was small and bare, with walls made of the same black stone. There was a sleeping platform built into one wall, a water dispenser in the corner, and nothing else. No windows, no decorations, just cold emptiness. The guard shoved Jake inside, and the door slammed shut behind him. He heard locks clicking into place, lots of them. Jake pressed his ear against the door and listened. Heavy footsteps moved away down the corridor. Then Silence.Jake examined his new prison carefully. The walls were perfectly smooth with no cracks or weak spots. The ceiling was too high to reach, even if he jumped. The water dispenser was built into the wall and couldn't be removed. Whoever designed this place knew what they were doing. He sat down on the sleeping platform and tried to think. The Zephyrians had captured him alive, which meant they wanted something from him. Information, probably. About Earth's defenses, military strength, maybe the location of human colonies. Jake knew he couldn't tell them anything, no matter what they did to him. A slot opened in the door, and a tray of food slid through. Jake looked at it suspiciously. The food was gray and had no smell at all. It looked like paste. He was hungry, but eating alien food seemed risky. What if it was poisoned? What if it was designed to make him talk? But after several hours, hunger won. Jake tried a small bite. It tasted like nothing, no flavor at all, just texture. But it filled his stomach and didn't seem to hurt him. He finished the entire portion and immediately felt stronger. The next morning, if it was morning, the guards came back. There were 4 of them this time, all carrying weapons that looked like metal rods with glowing tips. They motioned for Jake to follow them, and he had no choice but to comply. They led him through more corridors to a larger room filled with other prisoners. Jake stopped and stared. He had never seen so many different alien species in one place. There were creatures with rock-like skin, others that seemed to be made of living metal, and some that looked almost like floating clouds with eyes. The guards pushed Jake toward an empty spot along one wall. As he walked, the other prisoners looked at him with curiosity. Most of them had never seen a human before either. Jake sat down and tried to blend in while he studied his fellow captives. Near him sat a creature that looked like it was carved from granite. Its skin was gray and rough, with deep cracks running through it like natural stone. When it moved, Jake could hear pieces of rock grinding together. The creature noticed Jake watching and spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "You are the human," it said in heavily accented English. "I am Corvin of the Stone People. I have been here for 2 years." Jake was surprised the alien could speak his language. "How do you know English?" "The Zephyrians have teaching machines. They make us learn many languages. Useful for interrogation." Corvin's rocky face showed no expression, but Jake heard sadness in his voice. "Have you tried to escape?" Jake asked quietly. Corvin made a sound like rocks falling. "Many times we all have tried. The walls are strong, but not stronger than stone people. I broke through 3 different walls." He gestured with one massive arm. "They simply built stronger walls. Now the barriers are too thick even for us." Another prisoner leaned over. This one looked like living metal with a constantly shifting surface. "I am Circuit," it said in a voice like electronic music. "My people can phase through solid matter. I have tried to walk through walls 17 times. Each time, they modify their barriers to stop us." Jake listened as more prisoners shared their stories. Each species had tried to escape using their natural abilities. The telepathic mindwalkers had attempted to control the guards' thoughts, but the Zephyrians wore mental shields. The shape-shifting morphs had tried to disguise themselves as guards, but scan systems detected the deception. The energy beings had tried to overload the power systems, but backup systems kept everything running. "Every time someone tries something new," said a floating creature that introduced itself as Whisper, "the Zephyrians adapt their security. They learn from each attempt and make improvements. It's like they use our escape attempts to test their defenses." Jake spent the next several days observing everything around him. The guards followed exact routines. They arrived at the same time each day, walked the same routes, performed the same checks. They never varied their patterns or showed any creativity. Everything was done exactly by the book. During mealtimes, Jake watched how the guards distributed food. Each species got a different type of nutrition, perfectly calculated for their biological needs. The process was efficient, but completely mechanical. The guards never spoke to each other unless giving orders or reporting status. Jake noticed something else interesting. The guards seemed uncomfortable when anything unexpected happened. If a prisoner moved at the wrong time or made an unusual sound, the guards would stop and check their procedures. They would consult small devices that displayed written instructions, as if they couldn't make any decisions on their own. "Have you noticed how rigid they are?" Jake asked Corvin during one of their quiet conversations. "Rigid?" Corvin's grinding voice showed confusion. "They always do exactly the same things, in exactly the same order. They never change their routines or try new approaches. It's like they're following a script." Circuit's metallic surface rippled. "This is true. When I phase shifted through the wall, they didn't chase me immediately. They stopped and reported to their superiors first. By the time they got permission to pursue, I was already at the next barrier." Jake began to understand something important. The Zephyrians weren't just physically strong, they were mentally inflexible. They had probably conquered many worlds through superior technology and overwhelming force. But they relied completely on established procedures and couldn't adapt. When faced with truly unexpected situations, every escape attempt Jake had heard about followed predictable patterns. The prisoners used their natural abilities in obvious ways. The stone people smashed things. The morphs tried to disguise themselves. The mindwalkers attempted mental control. Each approach was logical and straightforward, which made it easy for the Zephyrians to develop countermeasures. But humans were different. Human strength wasn't in any single ability. It was in adaptability and creative thinking. Humans succeeded by doing things that didn't make sense to other species. They found unexpected solutions to impossible problems. Jake started testing small things. During meals, he would eat his food in different orders. Sometimes he would finish quickly, sometimes slowly. The guards always paused when he did something they didn't expect. They would check their instructions, looking for procedures to handle unusual prisoner behavior. He began moving around his cell in random patterns, walking in circles, then straight lines, then zigzags. The guards monitoring him through hidden cameras seemed confused by the purposeless activity. Jake could almost see them checking their manuals. "What do we do when the prisoner walks in a triangle?" The other prisoners started noticing Jake's strange behavior. "What are you doing?" Whisper asked during one exercise period. "I'm learning." Jake said, "I'm learning how they think." Corvin's rocky features showed interest. "And how do they think?" "They don't," Jake replied. "They follow rules. They obey procedures. They do exactly what they're told to do, and nothing else. That's their weakness." Circuit's surface brightened. "But how does that help us escape?" Jake smiled for the first time since his capture. "Because they're expecting us to act like every other species they've captured. They're prepared for logical escape attempts using our natural abilities. But they're not prepared for something completely illogical." Over the following days, Jake began to formulate a plan. Not a plan based on strength or special powers, but on confusion and misdirection. The Zephyrians had built their security around stopping predictable behavior. But what if someone did something completely unpredictable? Jake started sharing his observations with other prisoners, carefully and quietly. He didn't reveal his full plan yet, but he began to plant seeds of different thinking. For the first time in years, the prisoner started to hope. And in his cell at night, Jake smiled as he heard the guards discussing his behavior in their scraping language. They sounded worried. They had procedures for everything except dealing, with behavior that made no sense at all. Soon, Jake thought they would learn what it meant to face human unpredictability. Jake woke up on his 15th day in the prison and knew it was time to start his plan. He had spent 2 weeks watching, learning, and preparing. Now he understood the Zephyrians better than they understood themselves. Today, he would begin to break their perfect system. The first step was small. During the morning meal distribution, Jake did something no prisoner had ever done before. Instead of taking his food tray when the guard offered it, Jake politely said, "No, thank you," and sat back down. The guard stopped moving. His forearms froze in position, holding the tray in midair. Jake could see confusion in the alien's black eyes. The guard looked at his instruction device, then back at Jake. The device had no procedure for prisoners who refused food. The guard stood there for almost 5 minutes, unsure what to do. Finally, he set the tray down and moved to the next prisoner, but Jake noticed him looking back several times. The guard was clearly troubled by the unexpected response. Other prisoners watched Jake with curiosity. Corvin leaned over and whispered, "Why did you not eat?" "I'm not hungry yet," Jake said loud enough for the guards to hear. Maybe later. This was a lie. Jake was very hungry. But he needed to establish a pattern of unpredictable behavior. The guards needed to start questioning their procedures. An hour later, Jake walked up to the same guard and said, "I'm ready for breakfast now." The guard stared at him, consulted his device again, and reluctantly gave Jake the cold food. But Jake could see the confusion growing in the alien's mind. Over the next few days, Jake expanded his campaign of confusion. He would ask guards for things that weren't allowed, like extra water or different food. When they said no, Jake would simply smile and say, "Okay, thanks anyway." No prisoner had ever been polite to a guard before. He started exercising in his cell at random times. Sometimes at night, sometimes during the day, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. The guards monitoring him couldn't figure out the pattern because there wasn't one. Jake began talking to himself in different voices, as if he was having conversations with invisible people. He would argue with these imaginary companions about meaningless topics like the color of the walls or the taste of the food. The guards listening to his cell started filing reports about possible mental illness. But the most confusing thing Jake did was help other prisoners for no reason. When Corvin accidentally dropped his food tray, Jake immediately got up and helped clean it. When Circuit had trouble with a malfunctioning translator device, Jake spent hours trying to fix it even though it wasn't his problem. The guards had procedures for handling violent prisoners, sick prisoners, and escape attempts. But they had no procedures for handling kindness between prisoners. The concept seemed to break their understanding of how prisons worked. Jake could see his plan working. The guards were becoming nervous and uncertain. They started checking their instruction devices more often and consulting with their supervisors about Jake's behavior. The rigid system was developing cracks. After a week of this psychological warfare, Jake moved to the next phase. He began teaching other prisoners to act unpredictably, too. Not escape attempts, just small acts of randomness that would confuse the guards even more. Jake convinced Whisper to start humming random songs at different times. He got Circuit to ask guards about their families, even though guards never talked about personal matters. He taught Corvin to say, "Good morning" to guards who had never been greeted by a prisoner before. Soon, the entire prison block was filled with strange behavior. Prisoners were being polite, helping each other, and acting in ways that made no sense according to Zephyrian understanding. The guards were constantly consulting their devices and calling for backup over minor incidents. Jake watched the guards becoming more and more stressed. They started making mistakes, small ones at first, but mistakes nonetheless. A guard would forget to lock a door completely, or would arrive late for his shift, or would skip part of his normal routine because he was distracted by prisoner behavior he couldn't understand. The breakthrough came on Jake's 23rd day in prison. During the evening meal, one of the guards made a critical error. While trying to understand why Jake was teaching other prisoners to play a human game called rock, paper, scissors, the guard forgot to activate the security locks on the meal distribution cart. Jake noticed immediately, but he didn't react. Instead, he continued playing the game with 3 other prisoners, acting like nothing had changed. The guard finished his duties and left, never realizing his mistake. That night, Jake used his engineering knowledge to quietly disable the cart's tracking system. It took him 2 hours of careful work with improvised tools, but he managed to remove the small device that would alert the guards if the cart moved. The next morning, Jake put his full plan into action. He convinced 8 other prisoners to help him create what he called organized chaos. Each prisoner would do something completely different and unexpected at exactly the same time. In different parts of the prison, when the guards came for the morning shift change, Corvin began singing the human song Jake had taught him, loudly and off-key. At the same time, Circuit started flashing his metallic surface in complicated patterns. Whisper began floating in rapid circles, while other prisoners started playing the rock-paper-scissors game with great enthusiasm. The guards were completely overwhelmed. They had never seen prisoners behave this way before. Some guards rushed to stop the singing, others tried to get Circuit to stop flashing, and still others attempted to break up the game. But every time they focused on one problem, 3 more would appear. While the guards were distracted, Jake quietly moved the disabled meal cart to a service corridor he had identified during his weeks of observation. The corridor connected to the main guard station, but it was currently empty because all available guards were dealing with the prisoner chaos. Jake didn't try to fight his way out. Instead, he did something that would never occur to the Zephyrians. He knocked politely on the guard station door and waited. A confused guard opened the door, saw Jake standing there calmly, and froze, smiled and said, "Excuse me, but I think there's been a mistake. I was supposed to be transferred to a different cell today." The guard stared at him, completely baffled. Prisoners didn't walk up to guard stations and have conversations. They tried to sneak past or fight their way through. The guard's training had no procedure for this situation. "Transfer?" the guard said in broken English. "Yes," Jake replied confidently. "Check your system. Jake Morrison, prisoner transfer to Block 7. He said this as if it was the most normal thing in the world. The confused guard turned to check his computer, and Jake quietly picked up a key card from the desk. When the guard turned back around, Jake was still standing there patiently. "No transfer," the guard said. "Oh, my mistake," Jake said cheerfully. "Sorry to bother you." He walked away as if nothing had happened, leaving the guard even more confused. But now Jake had a key card. Over the next hour, Jake used the card to unlock doors throughout the prison. But instead of running for the exit, he began releasing other prisoners. Not all of them, just the ones who had helped him create the chaos. The released prisoners followed Jake's lead, acting like their freedom was completely normal. They walked calmly through corridors, nodded politely to any guards they met, and continued the confusing behavior that had worked so well in the cells. By the time the Zephyrians realized what was happening, Jake and his companions were already at the vehicle bay. They had simply walked out of the most secure prison in Zephyrian space by doing exactly what no prisoner had ever done before, acting like they belonged there. Jake found a transport ship and began the startup sequence. His years of pilot training allowed him to figure out the alien controls quickly. As the engines powered up, alarms finally started sounding throughout the facility, but it was too late. The transport lifted off with Jake and 8 other escaped prisoners aboard. As they flew away from the Black Fortress, Jake could see hundreds of guards running around in panic below. The impossible had happened. Prisoners had escaped not by fighting or using special powers, but by simply being unpredictably human. Jake flew the stolen transport ship low across the red desert of Zerion 7, trying to stay hidden from Zephyrian radar. Behind him, his 8 fellow escapees looked out the windows in amazement. Most of them had been prisoners for years and had never expected to see the outside world again. "Where are we going?" asked Circuit, his metallic surface rippling with nervous energy. "There's a communications array about 50 miles north of here," Jake replied, checking the navigation system. "If we can reach it, I can send a signal to Earth, but we need to be careful. The Zephyrians will be looking for us." Corvin's rocky face showed concern. "They will send many ships to find us. Their military is very strong." Jake nodded, but didn't slow down. He had studied Zephyrian military procedures during his weeks in prison. Their response to escapes was always the same: massive search parties, aerial sweeps, and roadblocks at every major location. But Jake was counting on their predictability. As they flew over a mountain range, Jake spotted something strange in the distance. A group of Zephyrian vehicles was moving across the desert, but they weren't heading toward the prison or searching the area. Instead, they seemed to be following the transport ship at a respectful distance. "That's odd," Jake said, pointing at the vehicles below. "They're not trying to intercept us." Whisper floated closer to the window. "Perhaps they haven't seen us yet." But Jake had a different feeling. Something about the way the vehicles moved suggested they were deliberately staying back. It reminded him of the behavior he had observed in confused guards, uncertain, hesitant, waiting for instructions that never came. The communications array came into view after an hour of flight. It was a tall metal tower built on top of a rocky hill, surrounded by smaller buildings and defensive walls. Jake expected to see Zephyrian forces guarding it, but the area looked almost deserted. Jake landed the transport ship in a valley behind the hill and turned to his companions. "I need to get to that tower and send a message to Earth. You should stay here with the ship in case we need to leave quickly." But Corvin stood up, his massive frame filling the ship's cabin. "We go with you. You freed us from prison. We will not abandon you now." The others agreed, and Jake felt touched by their loyalty. Together, the group of escaped prisoners climbed the rocky hill toward the communication tower. Jake expected guards to challenge them at any moment, but the climb was eerily quiet. When they reached the top, Jake saw why. The Zephyrian guards were there, but they weren't acting like guards anymore. Instead of pointing weapons at the approaching prisoners, they were standing in small groups, talking in their scraping language. Some of them were even staring at Jake with what looked like curiosity rather than hostility. One of the guards, wearing the decorations of a high-ranking officer, stepped forward. Jake recognized him as War Commander Vexther, the alien who had overseen his initial interrogation. But instead of ordering Jake's capture, Vexther did something unexpected. He removed his weapons and set them on the ground. "Human Jake Morrison," Vexther said in careful English. "We have been waiting for you." Jake stopped walking, confused. "Waiting for me? Why aren't you trying to arrest me?" Vexther's large head tilted to one side. "Because we need to understand what you did at the prison facility. It was impossible according to our knowledge. No species has ever escaped that way before." Jake looked around at the other guards. They were all staring at him with the same expression of confused fascination. None of them seemed threatening anymore. Instead, they looked like students waiting for a teacher to explain a difficult lesson. "I don't understand," Jake said. "Isn't escaping from your prison a crime? Shouldn't you be angry?" "Angry?" Vexther repeated the word slowly. "Yes, at first. We were angry, but then reports came from other facilities. Word of your escape method spread through our military network. Guards began requesting copies of the security recordings to study your techniques. Circuit's metallic surface brightened with interest. They studied how we escaped? Not just studied, Baxter continued. Our military analysts have spent days trying to understand the logic behind your actions. But there was no logic. You succeeded through methods that make no sense to us. This has created much discussion among our people. Vexther gestured to his soldiers. These warriors have served the Zephyrian Empire for many years. They have conquered planets and defeated armies using superior technology and overwhelming force. But your escape has shown them something they did not know existed, victory through confusion rather than strength. Jake began to understand what was happening. The escape hadn't just been a security breach. It had shattered the Zephyrians. Fundamental beliefs about how conflicts were won and lost. Your species fights differently than any we have encountered, Maxther continued. Other races use their natural abilities in predictable ways. But humans seem to ignore their limitations and find solutions that should not work. This troubles our military leaders greatly. Whisper floated closer to Jake. They're afraid of you? Not afraid, Vexther corrected. Concerned. The Zephyrian Empire faces threats from other galactic powers. Enemies who cannot be defeated through conventional military tactics alone. We have always relied on our technology and discipline to win battles. But what if our enemies learn to think like humans? Jake felt a strange shift in the conversation. These aliens weren't treating him like an escaped prisoner anymore. They were treating him like someone who possessed knowledge they desperately needed. Are you saying you want to learn how humans think? Jake asked. Vexther exchanged glances with his soldiers before answering. For 3 days, our high command has debated this question. Some believe humans are too dangerous and unpredictable to trust. But others argue that human thinking could solve problems our rigid methods cannot handle. The war commander pointed to the communications array. We could have destroyed this facility to prevent you from contacting your homeworld. We could have surrounded this area with overwhelming force. But instead, we chose to wait and observe, to see what the human would do when faced with an unexpected situation. Jake realized he was being tested again, but this time the test was different. The Zephyrians weren't trying to break him. They were trying to learn from him. What exactly do you want from me? Jake asked. Vexther stepped closer, and Jake could see something in the alien's black eyes that he had never seen before. Uncertainty. For a species that prided itself on absolute confidence and control, admitting uncertainty was probably very difficult. Our empire is powerful, but inflexible, Vexther said quietly. We produce excellent soldiers who follow orders perfectly. But we have no innovation, no creativity, no ability to adapt when our established methods fail. Your escape proved that flexibility can defeat strength. The war commander gestured to the communications tower. We will allow you to contact your homeworld. We will provide safe passage for you and your companions. But in return, we ask for something that may seem strange to you. Jake waited for the request, wondering what these proud aliens could possibly want from a human prisoner. We ask that you teach us, Baxter said. Not your technology or your military secrets. We want to learn how humans think, how you solve problems that have no obvious solutions, how you turn weaknesses into advantages. The other escaped prisoners looked at Jake in amazement. In the span of a few weeks, Jake had gone from prisoner to teacher. The aliens who had captured him were now asking to become his students. Jake looked around at the Zephyrian soldiers, seeing them with new eyes. These weren't conquerors anymore. They were a species that had realized their limitations and wanted to grow beyond them. And if I refuse? Jake asked. Vexther picked up his weapons and holstered them. Then you and your companions will leave safely, and the Zephyrian Empire will continue as it always has until other enemies destroy us through methods we cannot understand. Jake felt the weight of an entire civilization's future resting on his decision. These aliens had humbled themselves before a former prisoner, admitting their weaknesses and asking for help. For the first time since his capture, Jake smiled with genuine happiness. "War Commander Vexter," he said, "I think we need to talk." Jake stood on the rocky hilltop, looking at War Commander Vexter and his soldiers. The red suns of Zerion 7 were setting behind them, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. 3 weeks ago, these same beings had been his captors. Now they were asking to become his students. "Before I agree to anything," Jake said carefully, "I need to understand what you're really asking for. You want me to teach you how humans think. But why? What's so special about human thinking that the mighty Zephyrian Empire needs to learn it?" Vexter exchanged glances with his officers before speaking. "Perhaps it is best if I show you something. Will you come with us to our command center? Your friends will be safe, I promise." Jake looked at his fellow escapees. Corvin nodded his rocky head slowly. "We trust you, Jake. Whatever you decide, we will support." An hour later, Jake found himself in the main command center of the Zephyrian base. The room was huge, filled with screens and control panels that displayed information from across the galaxy. But what caught Jake's attention were the strategic maps showing current military situations. "Look at this," Vexter said, pointing to a large display. "For 6 months, we have been fighting the Helix Coalition in the Outer Rim. Our forces are superior in every way, better weapons, stronger ships, more soldiers, yet we are losing." Jake studied the tactical information. The Zephyrian forces were indeed impressive, but the enemy was using hit-and-run tactics, appearing in unexpected locations and disappearing before the Zephyrians could respond effectively. "Your enemy is being unpredictable," Jake observed. "They're not fighting the way you expect them to fight." "Exactly," Vexter said with frustration. "Our military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and direct confrontation. We establish control through superior firepower and disciplined tactics. But the Helix Coalition uses methods that make no strategic sense." A younger Zephyrian officer stepped forward. "They attack supply convoys that have no military value. They capture empty planets that serve no purpose. They retreat from battles they could win and fight battles they cannot win. Our computers cannot predict their next moves because their moves are illogical." Jake began to understand the problem. They are thinking creatively. They're not following standard military tactics because standard tactics are what you're prepared for. "Yes," Vexter said. "And 3 days ago, we received intelligence that the Helix Coalition has been studying recordings of your prison escape. They are learning from your methods." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. His escape techniques were being used against the people who had captured him, but now those same people were asking for his help to defend themselves. "So you want me to help you fight an enemy that's using my own tactics against you?" Jake asked. "More than that," Vexter replied. "We want you to change how our entire military thinks. Our high command has authorized me to make you an unprecedented offer." The war commander walked to the center of the room and faced Jake directly. "Jake Morrison of Earth, I formally request that you accept the position of strategic innovation, commander of the Zephyrian Defense Forces." Jake's mouth fell open. "You want me to become an officer in your military?" "Not just an officer," Vexter continued. "You would have authority to redesign our tactical doctrines, train our commanders in adaptive thinking, and lead joint operations against enemies who use unconventional methods." Another Zephyrian officer, older than the others, stepped forward. "I am High Admiral Zentak, commander of the Third Fleet. For 40 years, I have served the Empire through rigid discipline and unwavering adherence to protocol. But your escape has shown me that inflexibility is a weakness, not a strength. The Admiral removed his rank insignia and placed them on the table in front of Jake. I formally request to serve under your command as a student of human tactical. Thinking, Jake stared at the alien commander. You're offering to become my subordinate? If that is what it takes to learn, Zentok replied, our pride has made us weak. We have conquered many worlds through force, but we have never learned to adapt when force is not enough. More officers began stepping forward, each one placing their rank insignia on the table. Within minutes, the entire command staff of the Zephyrian base was formally requesting to serve under a human they had captured as a prisoner. Just weeks before, Vexther gestured to the pile of insignia. We are not surrendering to you as an enemy. Jake Morrison, we are surrendering to you as a teacher. We ask to become your willing captives in the pursuit of knowledge that could save our people. Jake looked around the room at the alien faces staring at him with hope and desperation. These beings had spent their entire lives believing in the superiority of their rigid military system. Admitting that a human prisoner could teach them something they didn't know was probably the most difficult thing they had ever done. What? About Earth? Jake asked. What about the fact that our species barely know each other? How do I know this isn't some kind of trap? Vexther activated a communication panel. You may contact your homeworld immediately. Explain the situation to your leaders. We will provide them with full details of our military capabilities, our current conflicts, and our proposal for cooperation. If Earth refuses, you and your companions will be returned home safely. Jake spent the next 2 hours on a secure communication link with Earth Command. The conversation was difficult. His superiors could hardly believe what they were hearing. A human prisoner had not only escaped from alien captivity, but was now being offered command of an alien. Military Force. Admiral Sarah Parker, Jake's commanding officer, finally spoke after a long silence. Jake, if what you're telling us is true, this represents the greatest opportunity in human history. Alliance with a galactic military power could secure Earth's future for centuries. But do we trust them? Jake asked. The question isn't whether we trust them, Admiral Parker replied. The question is whether you believe you can help them while serving human interests. From what you've told me, they need us more than we need them right now. After the communication ended, Jake gathered his fellow escapees to discuss the situation. The decision affected all of them. If he accepted the Zephyrian offer, they would likely remain on Zirian 7 as part of his advisory team. What do you think? Jake asked them. Circuit's metallic surface rippled thoughtfully. In prison, you taught us to think differently. Perhaps now you can teach them the same thing. Corvin's rocky features showed determination. You gave us freedom when we thought it was impossible. If you believe this will help prevent more wars, we will stay with you. Whisper floated in agreement. You changed everything for us. Perhaps you can change everything for them too. Jake looked at War Commander Vexther, who had been waiting patiently for his decision. The alien commander, who had once interrogated him as a prisoner, was now asking to become his student. I have conditions, Jake said finally. Name them, Vexther replied immediately. First, all prisoners in your facilities who were captured unfairly must be freed. Second, Earth must be granted full diplomatic immunity and protection under Zephyrian law. Third, any military actions we take together must be defensive only. No aggressive wars against innocent species. Vexther nodded to each condition. Agreed. High Command has already authorized these terms. Jake took a deep breath and picked up the rank insignia from the table. Then I accept your offer, War Commander, but I want one more thing. What is? That? Jake smiled and handed the insignia back to Vexther. Keep your ranks. I don't want to replace your command structure. I want to improve it. You'll remain War Commander, but you'll also be my first student in a new kind of military thinking. Vexter accepted his insignia with what might have been relief. "How do we begin?" "With the hardest lesson of all," Jake replied, "learning to be wrong." In human military thinking, the best leaders are the ones who can admit their mistakes and learn from them quickly. Your people will need to accept failure as a tool for improvement, not a sign of weakness. Over the following weeks, Jake established the first human Zephyrian cooperative command. What had started as a simple reconnaissance mission had become the foundation for a new kind of galactic alliance, one based not on conquest or domination, but on the sharing of knowledge and perspective. Jake stood in his new command center, watching his former enemies work together to solve problems neither could handle alone. The roles of captor and captive had been permanently reversed. The Zephyrians had captured a human prisoner, but in the end, they had asked to become captives themselves, willing students in the endless human art of adaptation and growth. In learning to think like humans, they discovered something their rigid empire had never known: the strength that comes from admitting weakness and the power that comes from embracing change.